you very much for coming along again this evening. This evening we're going to look at two very contrasting phenomena, and we're calling it the tale of two cities and of two states, but states of mind. In effect, we're witnessing in all of the cities on the coastlines in the United States a very rapid, sudden, and shocking transformation. It's so rapid and sudden that most people don't realize it's going on. And that's in fact part of the problem. That's why we have two states of mind, in a sense, going on at the same time. So we want to look at a tale of two cities in a way, that is to contrast two different cities, but then also look at two states of mind. And we'll do it by way of looking at Boston and Miami to begin with. But you can take any two cities that you want to and start comparing them. As cities and states, a tale of two cities and two states of mind. You'll remember that Charles Dickens started his book entitled A Tale of Two Cities about the French Revolution with a very prescient passage, a long statement about the dual nature of London and France and Paris at the time of the Revolution. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven. We were all going direct the other way. I wrote this in 1859, and it's pretty extraordinary. He had already been to America once, and to Austin. But he was to have another trip in about 8 years' time after that, and had a very different view when he came back the second time. In any case, let's take a look at places like Miami and ask what's going to be happening there in the next few years, decades, centuries. You can't help but see it's rather close to sea level here. In fact, this is Miami Beach, this is Miami back here, and there's just that thin body of water between them. This is in effect a barrier island with Miami back here. But it's a very precarious existence, as any scientist will tell you, as the professor of geology at the University of Miami, a fellow named Harold Wanless, has made it very clear. And others, like Peter Ward, this gentleman here, have gone down to interview him. Take a look.
One city that would face inundation this century is Miami, Florida. Just a few feet above sea level, it has virtually no defenses against a rising ocean. After 1 foot of sea level rise, these beaches would be regularly flooded at high tide. After 2 feet, many roads would be submerged. After 3 feet, if a hurricane strikes, the surging water would overcome sea defenses and cause flooding deep inland. Much of the region's coastal real estate would be ruined.
We're looking at millions and millions and millions of dollars of real estate here. And we can assume that every one of these things is $500 million to $1 million. We've got 100 here, we've got 100, we've got $1 billion in a very short area through here. So our $1 billion of houses, we get 1 meter, 3 feet of sea level rise, and every single one of these houses is useless. Who's going to buy it? What happens to this $1 billion of real estate by the time we get 3 feet? I mean, it's gone. It's useless. It's just, you scrape it off with bulldozers, and you just leave it here. That's what will happen. It'll just be left here.
And it's not just residential properties that will be affected.
Think of all the wharves and all the places where ships offload and unload all the goods and services. And if sea level rises even 3, 4, 5 feet, every single one of those ports has to be replaced. The cruise ship lines. There are billions of dollars of infrastructure that even a small sea level rise takes out. You got to rebuild it all over again.
After 4 feet of sea level rise, electricity supplies would be affected as coastal power plants are flooded. After 5 feet, some of Florida's freshwater resources would be contaminated with seawater. The Everglades National Park becomes a vast bay. After 6 feet, millions of Floridians would have to evacuate the state.
So what's going to happen to Florida?
By 2100, we'll be at least 4 to 6 feet higher. So this tide, which is not a high tide, will be about here, up to here. There's no way that we can keep the sea back as it rises. Miami-Dade County will be severely diminished.
By 2100, after 6 feet of sea level rise, Miami would look like this.
There's no way to prepare for this. You can't put levees around the kind of sea level rises we're in for. We're a city that's only a little over 100 years old. We became a town, an incorporated town in 1896, so we're not that old. But we may not make it for the next 100 years.
The only way to prevent Miami from flooding would be to construct a vastly expensive system of levees surrounding the city. It would be a major engineering challenge, as Miami is built on porous ground that allows seawater to seep through. Alternatively, if Miami was flooded, the city would eventually have to be abandoned.
There are cities you can save and cities that you can't save. And the choices will be based on, can we dike it off, can we put it off, or is this too expensive, not worth the price, not worth the effort?
Too expensive, not worth the effort. That's going to be the calculation. And it's going to happen within a century. All of those billions of dollars of real estate, it's visible on the Miami skyline at this point. Whether you look east, as we're looking here to the sunrise or west, they're gone, basically. But there's a climate boom going on right now, and it's pretty extraordinary. Listen.
From WBUR Boston and NPR, I'm Tom Astrup, and this is On Point. Real estate and development are booming in Miami Beach, the billion-dollar sandbar. But developers are placing a high-stakes bet. The city built on Miami's eastern frontier is incredibly vulnerable to climate change. Sea levels are rising. The city is hit with routine flooding that comes rain or shine. Salt water is creeping closer to the fresh water supply that provides millions in the Miami area with drinking water. It's not the only coastal city that will be challenged by climate change, but its situation is vivid. This hour, On Point, rising buildings and rising seas in Miami. You can join us on air or online where this conversation is always on. What do you see coming for cities like Miami, Miami Beach? Join us anytime at onpointradio.org or on Twitter and Facebook at onpointradio. A couple of months ago, here's CBS Miami's Gary Nelson reporting on high tides that caused major flooding on Miami Beach.
For a third straight day, much of Miami Beach was awash in floodwaters born of a king tide, the result of an extraordinary alignment of the earth and the moon that saw residents and tourists taking to bicycles, cars stranded in water above the running boards.
And this in a state where the governor doesn't like people to talk about climate change. Governor Rick Scott, reportedly banned the phrase. A Florida environmental official was told to use the term nuisance flooding instead of sea level rise. Here's Jon Stewart back in March on The Daily Show.
Nuisance flooding, moisture Inconvenience. Statewide jacuzzification. It appears by 2020 Miami will be involved in a surprise pool party.
Marco Rubio, not so sure about man-made climate change. Florida Senator Bill Nelson, Democrat, says there's no denying climate change.
Climate change is a reality, and we're seeing it today on the streets of Miami Beach.
Slosh, but also a lot of development and a lot of talk about resilience, about how Miami Beach may evolve and adapt for the future that is coming. Joining us now from Miami is Jenny Staletovich, environmental reporter for the Miami Herald. They've done a lot of great reporting on this. Jenny, welcome to On Point. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to hear from the mayor of Miami Beach in a minute and a whole lot of others. But just help us with the big picture here. I mean, after the real estate crash in the big recession, the Great Recession, we have seen Miami come back like crazy. Give us a sense of what the boom looks like, and how do people make sense of that up against the challenges that climate change is clearly going to bring?
Well, yes, I think on the skyline, the cranes are back. Building is going on not just on the beach, but also on the mainland, and it's big building. We had a story this morning about a Renzo Piano designed building going up at the north end of the beach, where they expect prices to be $1,600 a square foot.
Okay, $1,600 a square foot, enormously expensive building boom going on there. And why? Well, it's pretty interesting to take a look at why, and why people are buying condos. Miami condo buyers aren't homeowners, they're traders. Take a look.
This is the Marketplace Morning Report. I'm David Brancaccio. The key turn of phrase in our next story about Miami's building boom is the moment when Marketplace's Dan Weissman says apartment-shaped financial instruments.
Okay, you got to get a hold of this as a concept. Apartment-based financial instruments. Right? You thought you were buying an apartment. No, it's an apartment-shaped financial instrument. You're buying something that is supposedly has value that you can resell quickly. This is the whole point of it. It's a boom that is based on no residency whatsoever. This is absolutely extraordinary. Let's hear that phrase again.
And our next story about Miami's building boom is the moment when Marketplace's Dan Weissman says apartment-shaped financial instruments.
So we're going to make a left here? A left here. We're down.
I'd seen lots of cranes on the drive into downtown Miami, but I didn't really understand the pace of construction until I got a tour.
They're going to try to close this entire street because of the number of towers that are coming. So over here,
Peter Zalewski runs Crane Spotters, an information service keeping tabs on the building boom.
Right over here is a project called Brickell Flatiron, and it's one of two 60.
As we drove slowly through downtown,
inside you got two 60-story towers going off called
he could
Brickell
barely
Heights.
talk fast enough just to name all the towers going up.
Project called Mint. Then we have Ivy. Then we have the Wind.
Earlier that evening, Zalewski had explained to me what's behind all the construction. The bulk of these condos are not residences. They are apartment-shaped financial instruments.
There you go. Apartment-shaped financial instruments. Not an apartment. You're not going to move into it. It's a financial instrument.
In New York, you trade stocks. Chicago, we trade commodities. Miami, we trade condos. So this is what we do. We trade down here. These are traders who are not looking to live the American dream with a family of four and a dog. They're looking to make $100,000 a unit with virtually nothing being done but making a telephone call to your broker in Miami and having them unload it to somebody else's broker who's representing somebody in Russia.
The basic idea is investors park cash in these units, buying in before construction begins. They're betting that by the time the building is finished, prices will have gone up. Many of the buyers are from outside the United States, often from Latin American countries where other available investments and the home currencies make Miami real estate look like a stable place to park some cash. Bill Harden is a real estate professor at Florida International University. He likes to tell people that real estate is Miami's #1 export.
And they go, how can you export real estate? I said, because in an economic sense, it's not moving the product, it's where does the money come from that pays for those products to buy it and to maintain it.
We meet in his 11th floor office overlooking the ocean and overlooking a construction site just below his window, and soon that's going to be an 87-story building.
So somebody will have a great view in the future, but it won't be me.
Or at least somebody will own a great view. In downtown Miami, I'm Dan Weissman for Marketplace.
That's it. Someone will own a great view and sell it to the next sucker who won't realize that there's no way to get access to that apartment building, 80 floors or whatever. What about Boston, the city on a hill? Does Beacon Hill see what's coming with sea level rise in Boston and beyond? Well, if you talk to Austin Blackman, yes. He claims, as do many people in City Hall, he's the chief of environment for the city of Boston. He points out that he knows about sea level rise. Take a
This is
look.
one of more than 300 cities across 47 states choosing to adopt the goals of the Paris Agreement with or without President Trump. But this latest push is nothing new for the hub. Massachusetts has been working to become climate ready for more than a decade, and this morning we're giving you a closer look at just what that means.
That was Boston then. This is Boston now. Imagine what Boston would look like in 30 years.
If we had a large storm in 2050, then this would actually be an island a little bit here.
That's Austin Blackman. He's the chief of environment for the city of Boston.
Where we would be right now would actually be, we would be probably closer to waist, between our waist and our shoulders in terms of where water would be.
Now, he's the chief of the environment for the city of Boston, and he knows that by 2050, with a major storm, you're going to get water up to his shoulder. Pretty extraordinary. They have a plan. It's called the Climate Ready Boston. Take a look.
The city of Boston recently came out with a new report on climate change. The report has an update on the risks and challenges for Boston and on ways to respond. To tell us about Climate Ready Boston is the Commissioner of the Boston Environment Department, Carl Spector. Thank you very much for being with us, Carl.
And Carl goes on and talks about this plan.
Well, one thing in this report that seemed to be fairly almost alarming but not altogether new is that the changes you foresee are essentially going to remake the map of the city.
Well, they have that potential depending on the steps that we take over the next few decades.
Well, one of the things, of course, the most dramatic thing is the rise in sea levels, and there was one graphic in this report showing, especially in areas of East Boston, South Boston, the South End. Talk about that projection. Yeah, it may not turn out that way, but it certainly looks like it's something that you got to do something about here.
Well, no, absolutely. It is more than likely that towards the end of the century we will see at least 3 feet of sea level rise. And we do need to start thinking about what we're doing to prepare for that.
Yeah, to prepare for that and start talking about it. What about this whole plan in that map previously that's in the Seaport area? Any thought here?
Seaport is a vibrant 21st century neighborhood. Innovation, architecture, and modern amenities converge to create Boston's most sought-after destination. The Seaport Project, by WS Development, comprises over 7 million square feet of mixed-use development, spanning 20 city blocks and anchored by over 1.1 million square feet of retail space. At the heart of this development is Seaport Boulevard, a bustling thoroughfare connecting the Seaport to downtown Boston. Recently completed, One Seaport features over 800 luxury apartments set atop 250,000 square feet of retail. Distinctive retailers like Filson, Bonobos, Warby Parker, local favorite Mr. Sid, and LL Bean line Seaport Boulevard leading to Courthouse Square. This high-energy area features an open public space and incredible venues, such as the Grand Nightclub, Scorpion Restaurant and Bar, and Icon Theater, the only high-end theater in the city of Boston, King's Bowling, 75 Seaport, and Tuscan Kitchen. Along Northern Avenue, Equinox Sports Club, La Colombe, Sweet Green, Mr. Sid, Luke's Lobster, and Cafe Nero will become neighborhood staples for residents and employees of the 47 million square feet of office space within a few minutes' walk. Just past Fan Pier Park lies the edge of Boston Harbor, affording the Seaport District the benefit of natural beauty.
Okay, the benefit of natural beauty, but also sea level, right there, right? These are all animations. They're in the imagination of the architect, but you're being asked to buy into this. What about the real world?
If you're anything like me, you managed to make it through decades without ever hearing or having to know what the term bombogenesis meant. But then came 2018, which ushered in a storm known as Bomb Cyclone, which broke flooding records across Massachusetts. It was a once-in-a-generation flood, they said, but fast forward to this past Friday and Saturday, and bombed cyclone number 2. While it didn't quite break the record, it still managed to make the top 3 worst list in the city's history. So I guess once in a generation isn't so much anymore, and it's time we all get used to our streets regularly turning into canals that could give Venice a run for its money. As Globe Development reporter Tim Logan pointed out on Twitter, here's what he wrote: "This is the future world headquarters of General Electric, or at least it was on Friday. Who needs an ocean view when you can have an under-the-sea theme for your entire first 2 floors?" So what exactly is Boston doing to address this now regular threat, and is it enough?
That's the question. What's it doing, and is it enough? And is it any different than what's going on with the building boom down in Miami? This is what I mean by cities and states. A tale of 2 cities. We have Boston and Beacon Hill, and we've got Miami, Florida. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. Dickens saw this in 1859 in retrospect in reference to the French Revolution, but now we've got 2 states of mind and a tale of 2 cities all over the place. We now need, and desperate need, a citizen science alliance around the world to work together to devise a transition to a sustainable future. Not one underwater, not one that has no drinking supply of potable water because the sea has intruded upon the fresh water supplies. It's not complicated, really.